وبركاته. حياكم الله جميعا. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما إلى علمنا اللهم آمين. So this evening, inshallah ta'ala, this will be the fourth and final installation, inshallah ta'ala, in our series of the fiqh of fasting and acts of Ramadan. We spent two darses going over the fiqh of zakat, and also this will be the second dars going over the fiqh of siyam, and specifically during Ramadan. And we devoted a khutbah to the topic of Taraweeh, since that is I think it was last week or the week before, just because of how important actually there are lots of questions regarding Taraweeh, so that's why we spent the khutbah regarding it. And before actually beginning with fasting, that subject, when it comes to Taraweeh and questions related to that, there are a couple of very common questions that come up during the month of Ramadan. One of which is, if I pray Salatul Witr, for example, in the beginning of the night, for example, let's say after Isha I pray 3 rak'ah, 2 rak'ah and then post witr, or maybe, I pray 23 rak'ah, for example, with witr included. And then later on, I wake up maybe at 4 a.m. or 3 a.m. I can't sleep, and I figure, hey, you know what, I have the energy to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so I want to make wudu and do salat, but I already prayed witr. What can I do? So there are two different madhabs regarding this. I mean, there are actually a few different statements, but basically boils down to two different madhabs, or different schools, or different ideas that were promoted by the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam regarding this. One of which is, for example, to pray another witr. So, for example, you prayed 23 rak'ah after Isha, or maybe you prayed 1 rak'ah after Isha, and then you woke up at 4 a.m. You want to pray more. Then you pray one single rak'ah by itself. So it's as if you turn that witr into an even number, and then after that you can pray 2, 2, 2, and then finish off with another witr if you want. And that practice was actually done by many companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it was practiced by some of the early Salaf Salih, and so it's it has some precedent. However, the practice of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is different, and the practice of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was different. For example, and the majority of the ulama, instead, they say that if you prayed witr is, of course, the prayer at night, the night prayer after Salat al-Isha, in essence, and it's not obligatory to begin with. And so, and for example, even if you pray 2 by 2 by 2, and you don't pray witr at all, maybe Fajr time just comes too soon, or you want to make suhoor, for example, if you're fasting the next day, then maybe you just don't have time for witr, or perhaps any other reason, but you intended to pray witr but then fell asleep or something like that. So even then, it's not a sin. It's simply leaving off that which is better. And so when it comes to the witr prayer, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "La witrani fi layla." There are no two witrs in one single night. And Aisha radiallahu anha, she observed from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she mentioned once narrating that after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed witr, he sat up and prayed 2 more while sitting down. He prayed 2 more rak'ah sitting down, and it was before Fajr came. And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even after praying witr, he prayed shafa afterwards one time. and and likewise with Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu. And of course, with that, it's it's very easy. So it's that if you wake up, for example, before Fajr and want to pray more, then just pray more, two by two by two, for example, and do not add another witr. As the other opinion has you adding a witr in the beginning and a witr at the end if you wake up later. However, I don't know, to me that seems like a bit of takalluf if it were not that some of the Sahaba, Ridwanullahi alayhim, had done it beforehand. Allahu musta'an. But to get on with fasting, and one thing that and concerning witr is that, and also anything regarding fasting as well, and fiqh in general, is that the scholars of Islam have always differed on this, and this is one of on different issues. And I don't want to go into that in depth, why they differ here or there. Sometimes is this hadith da'if, or is it authentic, or what does it, or does it actually apply to this situation? And is it, and does it actually provide this ruling that one is espousing or not? So these companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they differed, and even during the life of the Prophet they differed, and he sallallahu alaihi wasallam tolerated their difference, and even sometimes he would rebuke them for differing, and other times he would not say a thing regarding their differing. And that seems to indicate that as long as you are following good principles in coming to the ruling, in other words, if you are a qualified mujtahid that has the background in usul al-fiqh and know how to choose opinions or know how to craft opinions, then you can do that, and that would be valid if you are seeking the if you have ikhlas and in doing so, and the conditions are there. So the companions of the Prophet ﷺ differed on things, and the four imams, for example, and the other imams that of their times, they differed over issues. And among masjid imams, and this is one thing that, for example, I remember one time in Peoria, Illinois, I remember hearing one physician who was a brother, he was lamenting about this was like, I think, the fourth imam that ICP, the Islamic Center of Peoria, had in a few years, and he said, so this is the fourth time that I'm changing my opinion on the on the distance of qasr, or the distance that I have to travel before I can shorten my prayers, because each imam had a different opinion about that issue. And so when it comes to issues like that, and I definitely have a lot of respect for the opinions of other imams in America, and former imams of the Islamic Center of Pittsburgh on issues, especially when you follow someone, and or you have a great respect for them and their ikhlas and their manners in deriving rulings or presenting rulings sometimes, then it's sometimes you see people that they when they have questions about the deen, they always refer to one single imam that they knew during a time and that they got close to, even if that imam has traveled quite a bit to a few other places after that. But anyway, so in light of some of those differences, I'm going to present just some of the main things here regarding some of the topics, and then afterwards, inshallah ta'ala, we will talk about just some of the main issues, inshallah ta'ala. So first of all, muftirat as-sawm, or as-siyam. What is it that breaks, what is it that nullifies an Islamic fast? And that's the most important thing for us to learn about, so that we can avoid these things. And first of all, there are a couple of conditions that must be met in order for something that breaks your fast to have broken your fast. So pay attention there. And first of all, is remembering that you are fasting before or doing or during that act that would normally break the fast. So for example, and this is based off the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, man nasiya wa huwa sa'im, whoever forgot while they are fasting, فَأَكَلَ أَوْ شَرِبَ, and then they ate or drank, فَلْيُتِمَّ صَوْمَهُ, then let them complete their fast, فَإِنَّمَا أَطْعَمَهُ اللَّهُ وَسَقَاهُ, because it is only Allah who provided them food, who fed them and gave them to drink. So this is a beautiful hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that, forgetfulness, and it shows that if you forgot, maybe you just ran to the fridge, grab an apple, and took a bite right out of it, and then maybe you even ate the whole thing, and then someone comes in and says like, oh, how's the fast going? It's like, oops, subhanallah. And then you remember afterwards, or you remember right after you took a bite or swallowed or whatever the case may be, then you remember this hadith, فَإِنَّمَا أَطْعَمَهُ اللَّهُ وَسَقَاهُ, it is only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who fed him and gave him drink. So as long as that happened while you were absent-minded of your fast, then it did not break your fast. So this is from the mercy and blessings of the Sharia of Islam, alhamdulillah. Second is intending that act or choosing it. Now, and not being coerced to break your fast or doing it against your will. And for example, this and the dalil for this, or the evidence for this, comes from the words of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Man dhara'ahu al-qay'u falaysa alayhi qada," that whoever vomits, they just get sick to their stomach and vomit, falaysa alayhi qada, then they do not have to make up anything. They're still fasting. وَمَنْ اسْتَقَى عَمْدًا فَلْيَقْضِي, and whoever intentionally vomited and forced themselves to vomit, then they should make up that day of fasting. And so this is, and of course, it's not so much during this time, but during the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, vomiting was actually, self-induced vomiting was a way of self-medicating for certain conditions, and it was just something that sometimes that they would do every so often, maybe once a month or a couple times a month, just as a bodily purification. Although this is not something that's done much nowadays at all, unless you realize that you ate something that you shouldn't have, for example. But otherwise, yeah. So based on this hadith, and so for example, when it comes to like vomiting and what is analogous to it, for example, during sleep, having a wet dream and ejaculating during sleep, normally, of course, that would cause one to break their fast. But when it happens, by accident, completely, unawares to it and not desiring it whatsoever, then that would not break your fast. You would still be fasting. One thing is regarding coercion. This is one point. I'm just going to point to some issues where scholars differed. And some ulama, they said that if you are coerced to eat, then you broke your fast, and you would have to make up that fast, but it would not be a sin. Simple as that. As the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, تجاوز الله لي عن أمتي الخطأ والنسيان وما استكره عليه, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has pardoned for me, on my behalf, for my ummah, what they do accidentally, what they do out of forgetfulness, and what they are compelled or forced to do under duress, for example. And so One opinion from the ulama is that if someone forces you to do this stuff, then to forces you to eat. For example, I've heard of, I mean, like, we know that this is going on nowadays, like for the Uyghur Muslims in China, in Western China, that they would be, and for many years, in fact, that during the month of Ramadan, the police would grab Muslims and force them to eat stuff during the day. So some ulama would say that even though they're forced to eat there, they'll still be considered fasting. And others said, no, you break your fast, you have to make it up, but there's no sin on you. And that opinion makes more sense to me. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. And yeah, so now what is it that breaks the fast? Any food or drink or swallowed foreign thing that could relieve feelings brought on by hunger or thirst. This is not, so it's not only what provides nutrition for the body, but even, for example, for example, when you swallow something, speaking of swallowing, bismillah, when you swallow something, it provides relief for the throat, and it feels good. So, for example, and where I say foreign thing here in this definition, that is meaning foreign to yourself. It's not like, for example, you are just suddenly you bit your tongue or something like that, and there was blood, and you swallowed that blood, or if you are you have some saliva and you swallow that saliva, no big deal, or phlegm or whatever the case may be, snot or blood, from the nose that goes to the back of the throat. So that would not break your fast, inshallah ta'ala. And but if it comes from outside that you put in your mouth from the outside, then it would break your fast. And to that extent, for example, what ulama mention, and even if it came from yourself originally, so for example, if I can't imagine anyone doing this, but if they spat and then picked up their spit and then swallowed their spit after it came out of their mouth, then picking it up and putting back in, so that's just one scenario that they sometimes mention, for example. And so that is one thing that breaks the fast. Now, here's a question. Now, we know that forgetfulness, that can lead to, if you forgot that you are fasting and then you ate, that's pardoned. What if you were delusional? What if you thought, well, I still got time before Fajr, and you ate, and then you realized that Fajr started 15-20 minutes ago? What then? So in that case, the ulama say, that al-yaqeen la yazulu bil-shak, and that state of certainty, you were certain that it was, the still very, very early morning, still late night, it wasn't Fajr time yet. That was the ruling that was extant, and that you believed, and that you were that was still in effect at that time. And so that would be pardonable, and you should still fast and count that fast. However, applying that same rule to, if you think that if the iftar is early, or if you think it's iftar before that it's iftar, and you start eating, like, for example, 20 minutes before iftar, then that would, applying that same logic, it would not be pardonable. And so based on it, because the certain ruling would still be that it's daytime. Now, however, there's one question that comes up with this is, why would someone make that mistake? Maybe they look outside and they see it's dark outside, but yet, according to the adhan clock, you still have 5 minutes left, or according to the adhan sheet, there's still 5 minutes left. And this is a bit controversial, because these sheets and these times were made based on, the land being totally level and there being no hills and valleys or tree lines or buildings or anything this or that or the other. And so one time the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was traveling with the Sahaba, and they were behind a sand dune, and the sun had gone down behind the sand dune, the Prophet ﷺ said, and this is authentic hadith, he told Bilal, get ready the iftar. And Bilal said, if we just stand on top of our camels, we'll see the sun. And the Prophet ﷺ then said, and I don't remember the wording precisely, but it was a portent, a kind of ominous word that, when people start delaying the iftar, then that would be, a bad time for the ummah, or something along those lines. So, Allah musta'an. So it seems like we have entered that age where we are delaying the iftar. And if we were to truly, truly, truly follow the Prophet's advice, we would have a masjid in every single neighborhood. Or I don't know if that's the Prophet's advice to have a masjid in every single neighborhood, but we would, we could call the adhan in our own homes. We could potentially not rely on these papers and clocks and calculations, and simply look for when the sun goes below the line. Now for that, I would follow natural lines or natural barriers that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala placed, and not the barriers of, not man-made barriers, obviously. So, for example, if you are, happen to be, camping on Mount Everest or something like that, or camping in the woods, and, you are detoxifying, or what's the word, detoxification or detoxificating or whatever, detoxifying yourself from electronic devices and that sort of thing, then you would follow the sun until it goes behind, the tree line, until it's no longer visible, even if a sheet tells you there's 10 more minutes, for example. Now, because however, in Islam, one concept that's very important is the concept of the jama'ah, and being united with the rest of the Muslims. So that's very important, which is why I don't practice that in my home. I don't practice that. I would only practice that if I was camping, 50 miles away from the city, for example. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said, الصوم يوم تصومون والفطر يوم تفطرون, that the fasting is the day that you all are fasting, and the fitr, Eid al-Fitr, is the day that you all are celebrating. And so he's talking about the community, and basically saying that if the community decides one thing, then don't do something else. As the Prophet ﷺ said, Yadullahi ala jama'ah, that Allah's hand is over the jama'ah, وَمَنْ شَدَّ شَدَّ فِي النَّارِ, and whoever deviates from that, whoever, goes shadad or shudud, then, that they have done so in the fire. So it's very, very important not to see ourselves as being rogue elements in the community. I'm gonna fast. I'm gonna, break my fast the proper way, following the sunnah. No, the sunnah is to follow the community in this. Alhamdulillah. So, all right. Next, so bloodletting, donating, cupping, and this was something I'm not sure if I talked about this before. However, I talked about this actually in the masjid. The very last Wednesday night dars that I gave before our unfortunate quarantine was about the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, aftar al-hajim wal-mahjum, that the one who performs the cupping has broken their fast and the one who receives the cupping has broken their fast. Why did the Prophet ﷺ say that? So cupping during the time of the Prophet ﷺ was, of course, you would, you know, you would create a vacuum at a certain part of their skin. And how would you do that? By there was a way that they would do it by lighting a match, and also part of it could involve inhaling, like sucking, like to inhale. And so they and also once you do this vacuum and then to pinpoint the spot and then poking a bunch of holes and then creating the vacuum again. Nowadays, when doing this, they have devices and pumps to extract the bad blood that way. However, during the Prophet ﷺ's time, they would actually use they would simply inhale. And so it was almost inevitable that, some little bits of the other person's blood would get in your mouth and, go down your throat and in your lungs, for example. And this is why, for example, that cupping fluid, blood going in your lungs, for example, or that's why we could also say that that smoking, for example, breaks the fast, even if it doesn't go in your stomach, and vaping likewise. Anything that goes, past the windpipe, past the esophagus, or past, anything, just going beyond your throat. And so, um, the Prophet ﷺ also said that the one who's getting cupped breaks their fast, al-mahjum. Why? Because they are performing an act that actually makes their body weaker, and that's something that's not allowed. It's something that's when you are fasting, you should not increase the burden upon yourself. يريد الله بكم اليسر ولا يريد بكم العسر. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants ease for you and does not want hardship. And so that's why women who are menstruating, who are bloodletting in a different way, that's why they do not fast. They are not allowed to fast. And so just just so that certain people, everyone, the fasting should be easy. It should be an exercise. It should have some challenge, but it should not be overly difficult. It should not be overly difficult. And so that's why, for example, donating blood or receiving cupping, for example, and menstruating, these things, that these things would nullify a fast. And of course, in the case of menstruation, it prevents a fast entirely altogether. But in the case of, bloodletting or cupping or donating blood, then it should be avoided. Now, if there's a great need for donating blood for some reason, you have a specific blood type and it's an urgent matter and it cannot be delayed, or it can, it's not feasible to delay it until after breaking fast, then you could do that, and it would be breaking your fast, and then afterwards you can make up that day. And that's why when you go to donate blood, they give you a bunch of snacks afterwards, because it does make you weaker, and Allah does not want you to be overly burdened by His ibadah, by His worship, or at least not the ritualistic worship. All right, so smoking, vaping mentioned before, and this is something that the vast majority of scholars of Islam, contemporary scholars, have you know have passed fatwa that smoking breaks the fast. It's not allowed to fast, and alhamdulillah, there's not much dispute over that, alhamdulillah. And for those who are addicted to cigarettes and smoking, that it's Allahu Musta'an, it's a habit that a lot of people pick up, a lot of men especially, they pick up in their youth, in their teens, and simply for the reason of looking cool. Allah Mustaan. I mean, imagine, disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and hurting your body, and also spending lots of wealth simply just to look cool. I mean, that's how powerful is it to look cool, subhanAllah. SubhanAllah, Allahu Mustaan. But, these, it's, of course, the health problems of it is well documented, and ma'loom bil darura. I mean, everyone knows it. But, the cost of it. I mean, subhanAllah, think of how much, when you think of the poor and needy around you, and around the world, and to spend, you know, hundreds of dollars or even thousands of dollars on this stuff every year is mind-boggling. And it's not, and these corporations, a lot of these corporations, the people that run them are, in many cases, if you learn more about them, they don't have a humanitarian bone in their body. A lot of really, ruthless people, and a lot of Islamophobes as well. People that you do not want to give money to whatsoever. Allahu Mustaan. So after talking about some of the things that break a fast, what is discouraged while fasting, because it might lead to breaking a fast, or because scholars have differed over it. Does it break a fast or not? Any acts that lead to arousal, sexual arousal, and pre-seminal, that what's colloquially referred to as pre-cum. And so anything that leads to that, intentionally doing, that would be, very, very, very discouraged. And, for example, Aisha radiallahu anha, she mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ would kiss his wives while he is fasting, but she also said that he has greater possession, greater self-control than any of you. And so the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, based on those words, that observance of Aisha radiallahu anha, which is no doubt true, the scholars have differed. Some said, well, the Prophet did that, so that means it's okay. Whereas others said, well, Aisha said he has more self-control, so that means the rest of us don't have self-control. That means the rest of us, it breaks our fast. So, even if it just simply brings some arousing thoughts or whatever the case, personally, I believe that it does not break the fast, unless it leads to, actual ejaculation or intercourse. And so, intercourse with or without ejaculation. And so that's why I put it under discouraged. However, as I mentioned, some might say that it's wrong. Oh, there's the hadith right here. كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقبل وهو صائم. He used to kiss while he was fasting. ويباشر وهو صائم. Mubashara, that's like, foreplay, whatever, and gentle foreplay, like, clothing on, maybe things that spouses might do playfully with each other, touching here or poking there, or whatever the case may be, that would normally may be perceived as sexual, but right. وَلَكِنَّهُ أَمْلَكُكُمْ لِأَرَبِهِ. He is the one who has, the so, okay, that's okay. Connection with that word and Surah An-Nur. But so as I mentioned, that he has more control. Amlak, he has greater possession, self-possession of his desires and control there. So, yeah. Now, holding foreign objects in the mouth. Like, for example, one time I watched this movie. It's called Cube. I saw this movie a long, long time ago. And these people were trapped in like this strange-looking prison. And, in the beginning, one of the guys, he said that he used to be in a real prison, and if they did not have access to water, what they would do is take a button from their shirt and hold it in their mouth, and that would help with saliva, generating saliva to keep themselves, just to keep their throat moist. I mean, it's saliva. It's not going to hydrate you. It's not going to provide you with your 8 cups of water a day, obviously, or anything like that. And saliva has a interesting, very different composition from water, and it's something natural, and it's something that's okay to do. But however, just simply having something in your mouth during the day, it's something that's discouraged, without need. But I know, like for example, myself and my own conditions, vocal cord conditions, I do need to do that. But so one subject that's disputed here is if a person swallows that, do they break their fast or not? Again, the scholars differed because does it nourish? For example, if you have a shirt button, would it nourish you? No, it definitely doesn't, and it's likely to pass through you as it was and as it was originally. So, however, the simple fact that you swallow it, for example, maybe on accident, then if it was on accident, that's one thing. But if you swallowed it on purpose with that intention to relieve you, for the for the simple joy of swallowing something, then that would break your fast if you do so, remembering, your fast and intentionally. So, yeah. Also, excessive water during madmada and istinshaq, and this is based off the Prophet ﷺ's words: "أسبغ الوضوء وخلل بين الأصابع وبالغ في الاستنشاق إلا أن تكون صائما." So the Prophet ﷺ is saying, perform your wudu, your ablution completely, and خلل بين الأصابع, to mix the water between your fingers. Excuse me. And to exaggerate when inhaling the water or sniffing the water, not sniffing the water, you're not smelling the water, but when doing the istinshaq, bringing the water in your nose, to be, to kind of exaggerate with that, unless you are fasting, illa an takuna sa'iman, unless you are fasting. So that suggests that if you do it like that you would normally do, with a lot of vigor, then it could lead to breaking your fast. So when performing ablution, be wary and just be, very moderate and light when washing your mouth and nose. Now, similarly with this is, for example, using lip balm or chapstick, and you're using it, and maybe you are licking your lips throughout the day because maybe it smells good, which is why it's good to get unscented, just plain Jane chapstick or Vaseline or something like that if you need it, or just to wait until you break your fast afterwards. But and same thing with toothbrushing, because these are risky. So, for example, with brushing your teeth, what I like to do is when I'm having suhoor, the very, very last thing that I do before beginning the fast is brush my teeth. And then, of course, throughout the day, as the prophets, as the companions, they described, رأيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يستاق ما لا أحصيه وهو صائم. Some of the Prophet's companions, they said, I saw the Messenger of Allah using the miswak an amount that I could not even count. Ma la uhsi. I couldn't even count as much as he did it while he was fasting. So the Prophet ﷺ would have a foreign object in his mouth, and he would use it for and it's a common misconception that the miswak is only for cleaning the teeth. The Prophet ﷺ used it. The ahadith that describe the ways that he used it sometimes, subhanallah, that sometimes just as much as we use a toothbrush. So not only for the teeth, but also for the gums. And sometimes even, he would, do so, and even a little blood would come out, and also for the tongue. And the Prophet ﷺ would even, stick it far back in the throat, even to the point of the companions describe hearing him go like, ugh, ugh, because, he's really cleaning the mouth entirely, giving a deep clean to the mouth through that. So it's, the way to preserve your breath is to use a tongue scraper or use a miswak, which even, a miswak from the arak tree has its own sense to it. And so, when it comes to, for example, food tasting and some of these issues, you know, it, and of course, saliva is generated by doing that motion. So that's where a lot of our fiqh comes from, and a lot of our understanding for some of these issues comes from, because of the Prophet's use of the siwak, the miswak, during fasting. Now, of course, discouraged while fasting, not because it breaks the fast, but because it might nullify the reward of fasting. Of course, is insulting others, pushing people, trying to start a fight, trying to pick a fight, backbiting people, speaking badly about people, nasallallahu salama. So, I mean, these are the easiest major sins to fall into, nasallallahu salama, and it happens so much, even among salihin. Allahumma musta'an. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us all. But, backbiting, when someone is about to say, about someone else, you know, anything, start guarding your ears, and count the words that come out your mouth. And if you can change the subject, go ahead and change the subject, because it's very, very dangerous. You do not want to be, because the punishment for that in the hereafter is tremendous. It is one of the major sins. So what about medicine? Now, if it has to be swallowed, in pill form or liquid form, then yes, it breaks the fast. But then you would make up that fasting day if this is just a temporary medicine. And of course, if that medicine is important for you to take during the day. But what about rescue inhalers? So that's a common question. Rescue inhalers. That, for example, people with asthma have. And this is, and of course, anyone who has tried to research this issue, they will find a myriad of different opinions from the scholars about the use of inhalers, which, has a kind of chemical inside of it that works immediately to, I guess, repair the muscles or in the lungs somehow. And, there are different types of inhalers. And some scholars have said this type breaks the fast, whereas that type doesn't. Others have said the exact opposite. Some have said they both break the fast. Some have said none of them break the fast. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Allah knows best, but I kind of lean towards it breaking the fast, because for some reasons that have preceded, of giving relief, even if it's an emergency thing. I mean, sometimes maybe you are, for whatever case or for whatever reason, there could be an emergency. Maybe you have, all of a sudden swallowed some dust in your throat or something like that, and you're coughing profusely, and you need to drink some water while you're fasting. Sometimes there are emergencies where you need to, break, some kind of emergency where you need to break your fast for some reason. And, you just simply make up that day. You continue the fast for that day simply to be united with the rest of the Muslims, but you make that day up, no problem. However, like, for example, other scholars have said that, for example, I know, like, in America, well, many scholars differ. For example, Sheikh Yasser Qaldi, he follows an opinion from one fiqh group, one international fiqh group, that none of it breaks the fast. Allah knows best. Allah knows best. And, there's usually asthma attacks that require an inhaler might, it's very rare that it happens more than a couple times a week or once a week. So, so that's, so making up that amount of days should not be a challenge at all, inshallah ta'ala. Otherwise, if it were something that happens every day, then or every other day, then I would not see it as breaking the fast. Allah knows best. Allah knows best. Also, injections, and very common question: insulin injections, and here Allah Subhanahu wa Taala knows best. I do not see that as breaking the fast, because when you inject something in yourself like that, that definitely doesn't provide you any relief for your hunger or your throat at all. In your whether it's your windpipe or this or that or the other at all. But Allah Subhanahu wa Taala knows best. And however, some scholars, there's a statement of Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, and this has caused quite a lot of controversy in what breaks a fast among the different madhahib. And when he was asked about something, and he said, إنما الفطر مما دخل, or الفطر مما دخل, that breaking the fast only comes from what enters your body. And so with that, some ulama have, and I vehemently disagree with some of these opinions. For example, that they would definitely say that an injection would break your fast, and I've even seen that, for example, putting earplugs or earbuds in your ears, that breaks the fast. SubhanAllah. That's something that I vehemently, very, very strongly disagree with. And I don't find that makes any sense at all. And they would say that eardrops breaks the fast, and that eye drops break the fast, and that anything that goes in any orifice breaks a fast. And you can imagine that, like an enema, that would break a fast. However, I do not see those things as breaking a fast, and Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala knows better. So now, after talking about some of the things that break a fast and some things that are discouraged because maybe they're disputed or not, so what happens if you do break a fast? Whether you have an excuse or do not have an excuse, what happens? So we have a couple concepts here. We actually have 4 concepts here, but we're going to take 2 per slide. We have 2 slides left, inshallah, not much left. So one of which is fidya, which is feeding a poor person for the one with a long-term excuse. An example here is necessary daytime medication regimen, or dietary requirements. Maybe they have to, for some reason, they have to eat every 4 hours or something like that. Or maybe they have an uncommon difficulty from fasting due to maybe some limitations that their body has, or maybe due to old age. Now the fidya here, where Allah Subhanahu wa Taala says, وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ فِدْيَةٌ طَعَامُ مِسْكِينٍ. So what this means, and upon those who have the ability to do it, but they're not going to, because it enters the realm of mashaqqa. And we remember that mashaqqa is a degree of difficulty. It's not darura, it's not necessity. I have to break my fast in order to save my life or else I'll die. No, it's not like that at all. But it's a degree of hardship. It's a certain degree of great hardship that the kind of hardship that makes you stand up. You might, or that makes, for example, a person sit down while praying, for example, instead of standing. And so here, for those that have the ability to fast, but it brings them a lot of difficulty, whereas Allah wants ease for you and does not want to put you in hardship, then fidyatun ta'amu miskin. They pay a fidya, which is feeding a poor person. Ta'amu miskin, which is ta'amu miskin means feeding a poor person right there. So, and this is for now. This could be because someone has a chronic illness, or like I said, maybe they have the ability to fast. They feel like from a hunger perspective, I can fast. I'm not going to get hungry at all. no problem, or at least the hunger is not going to kill me. But however, because of the fast, I need medication, or else this is going to happen or that's going to happen, or I need to eat or drink because of for this reason or that reason. Then that's different. And that's different, and you could break your fast for that, and you would have to pay fidya for that if this is something that's a long-term issue. Old age is long-term. If now on the other hand, qada, if if you think that you have the ability, or that you will have the ability within a reasonable time, and some scholars say before next Ramadan, and I like the way that sounds. So if you believe that you will be able to make up the fast, and that this issue that prevents you from fasting during Ramadan will be gone before next Ramadan, then make it up. You do not have to do the fidya, but make it up later. فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرَ. That whoever is among you who is sick, temporarily sick, or traveling, then make up a number of days later. Now this and qada, which is to make up, can also be done on behalf of a deceased person who has fasting debt, whether that fasting debt is from an oath that they made. Like for example, they say like if Allah gives me $1,000,000, then I have to fast 10 days out of shukr. For example, if someone says that, and then they became a millionaire, and then they got hit by a bus the next day, nasallallahu salama, then their inheritors, after inheriting $1,000,000, they have to fast 10 days out of for the deceased. Now, and so this is why it's also important when if you have fasts to make up, let your family know about it, so that if something happens, then they can make up that fasting for you. Now, it's also allowed to pay the fidya from their terika, from their estate, but it's also allowed to make up the fasting. Now, the fidya is the agreed upon thing. If someone passes away and they have fasting to do, that for Ramadan fasts, then the scholars generally say that fidya, that you can pay to feed poor people on their behalf, whereas a lot of them will distinguish and say that if it's an oath, if it's fasting for an oath that they have to make up, then there's no fidya for it. You don't pay a poor person. Someone has to fast on behalf of that person, which is why it's not good to make oaths. By the way, one thing, just let me know here, because I think okay, I'm holding this in my right hand. However, on here the video is mirrored a bit, so it looks like I'm not. Anyway, so on behalf of the deceased with fasting debt. Now, one question that I got last time, but did not get a chance to answer, or at least I mentioned it during the dars itself, was about fasting, about pregnant and nursing women. So, and I mentioned the opinion of the Hanabila last time, which, however, after doing a bit more research, honestly, I'm not too persuaded by that opinion. Now, there is a hadith about this. Where is it? I can't believe I didn't put that. SubhanAllah. So the hadith is that the Prophet ﷺ said, "Inna Allah Azza wa Jal wada'a ala al-musafiri shatra salat." That Allah Subhanahu wa Taala put off from the traveler half of their prayer. وعلى الحامل والمرضع الصوم وعلى المسافر والحامل والمرضع الصوم, and that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala put off from the traveler and the pregnant and the nursing fasting. That Allah Subhanahu wa Taala has lifted fasting from them, or in other words, given them a rukhsa, because even the traveler has to make up the fast. However, one who is pregnant and or nursing, according to that hadith, which is a Hasan hadith. It's a Hasan hadith, so it's not 100% authentic, but most. But inshallah, it's there's reason to believe that the Prophet ﷺ said those words, and so someone who is pregnant or nursing does not have to fast. Now for making up the fast, what do they do? So there's different opinions from the scholars on this, as I alluded to last time. And honestly, this is one of those issues where, just like with zakat and the subject of 401k with zakat, like should you pay zakat on the 401k every single year or just when you withdraw it? As I mentioned, if if most of your wealth is outside the 401k, and or it is easy for you to pay that zakat for all of the wealth, including the 401k, without threatening your livelihood at all, then do it. However, but if you withdraw, however, if most of your wealth, you wouldn't, if you paid the zakat for the 401k while it's still in the bank, and by paying that zakat that threatens your livelihood in some way, then wait until you withdraw it. Similarly with this, I have a mix between two different opinions with this. So there are some women I know of, I've heard of, that, for example, maybe they've had 5 kids. One Ramadan they're pregnant, the next Ramadan they're nursing. One next Ramadan they're pregnant, the next one they're nursing. The next one they're pregnant, the next one they're nursing. And maybe, basically they spend like 10 years or so, or even more, or less, let's say 5 years, just of non-stop pregnancies and nursing, for example. And so they have to so if they've made up those Ramadans, that would be 150 days, for example. If it's 5 years, 150 days. And I know, I mean, my wife had 3 children back to back with a little bit of leeway in between those kids, about 18 months, 19 months in between each child. However, I mean, that's really, really from that span of like a 5-year period. And for individuals in these kind of situations, and obviously there were no doubt women like that during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, it's not heard of during the Prophet's time that anyone, women, once they hit 40 years old and or 45 and hit menopause and past their childbearing age, hit 50 years old, then they suddenly had to make up 150 or 200 days of fasting. That's however, some scholars were of the opinion, but I personally disagree with it very strongly, and which is why and so, like, for example, Abdullah ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Abbas, they said that pregnant and nursing women, they fall under this ayah. وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ فِدْيَةٌ طَعَامُ مِسْكِينٍ. Those who have the ability, they have the ability to fast. However, it would harm the livelihood of their either the fetus or the newborn child that is still nursing. And so, that they have the ability. يُطِيقُونَهُ. And so they should give a fidya. They should definitely give a fidya. No doubt about that. But then, should they do qada on top of the fidya? That's the question. And so personally, I believe that if there's only one Ramadan that's affected, then definitely do the qada. If it's easy for you, if it's easy for you to do the qada, if you want to do fasting 150 days just for the sake of, for example, or 90 days or however much it could be, Allah knows best, then you know, go ahead and do that just because some scholars say that you should. And you want to make sure that you meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without any debt to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, I do not believe that's obligatory, and I do not believe that, beyond that amount that there is a requirement for that. Allah knows best. However, just to, if, just to, uh, if you only have one Ramadan to make up, then it's easy to make up those days throughout a single year, inshallah ta'ala. Fasting, 1 day a week. For example, there's 52 weeks a year. Of course, 4 or 5 of those weeks are taken up by Ramadan, but one day a week, or a bunch of days in the winter, for example, when the days are short, then that can be very, very easy, inshallah. Allah knows best. Allah knows best. But definitely fidya. Definitely fidya. Yeah. Even though that's not agreed upon by the scholars, but that makes sense in light of the ayah, and that's what some of the Sahaba agreed to, and I believe is very, very strong opinion. So the other two concepts, and this is the last slide for this evening, inshallah ta'ala. The other two concepts are kafara and isqat. So what's the kafara? The expiation, and that is when you break your fast knowingly, intentionally, without any excuse whatsoever. And so some ulama say that, for example, if you simply decide to eat during the day during Ramadan, or whether it's eating during the day, or drinking water, or whatever the case may be, or masturbating during the day during the month of Ramadan, that you simply make up a day in its place. Some scholars say that. The majority say that, I believe. Others say, a very, 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 very small minority, and this is based off of a hadith, although it is weak, that that if you break a fast for a day, then you can never make it up, even if you fast the rest of the days of your life. Now that's a weak hadith. However, of course, it's a very, very strong threat if it is true. But however, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. I don't follow those opinions. What I do believe is that the kafara, and of course this goes back to what we know about the kafara, goes back to a couple incidents from the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One of which is just to summarize, when a man came to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he said that I had intercourse with my wife during the day of Ramadan and fasting, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked him, to free a slave. And so the man said, I don't own any slaves, or I can't do that. I don't have the money to buy a slave's freedom. And so then the Prophet ﷺ said, okay, then fast 60 days consecutively. And so then the man said, how can I fast 60 days consecutively when I had trouble even doing this single day of Ramadan, in this sort of manner. And what's interesting is that when the Prophet said, before, what the Prophet said, of course, he went on to the next option. He said, okay, well, but he did not rebuke the man. He didn't say, where's your self-control? He didn't say, what's the matter with you? You can't, stay away from your wife for just from dawn to sunset, He did not shame the man, which is really, amazing from the akhlaq of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. SubhanAllah. But here, and even though this man gave an excuse, he said, I didn't last this day. How am I going to last 60 days? This is actually some scholars, and this is in the Hanbali madhab, Imam Ahmad radiallahu anhu. He mentions that sometimes that even in cases of, it's that his belief that a person could be so in such need of purging that need, that whatever sin comes from it, like for example, during the day of Ramadan, or during the or during Hajj, for example, or especially during the day of Ramadan. I shouldn't say for Hajj right now, but that would be would not be any issue whatsoever. But because of the shiddah of their Hajj, but Allah knows best. That seems ba'id and probably not. I don't see an excuse for that. Allah knows best. But however, so if a person cannot fast 60 days consecutively or does not believe that they would have the ability, the Prophet ﷺ then told the man to feed 60 poor persons. And so the man said that he, again, that he does not have that ability because he himself is poor. And so then of course, as the story went on, then the Prophet ﷺ gave him, commanded him to feed 60 poor persons, and the Prophet ﷺ ordered a bunch of dates for him to distribute to poor people. And he said, well, I don't know any house in Medina poorer than my own. Now, in all this, the man who came to the Prophet ﷺ, he might have been speaking the honest, literal truth, that there is no house poorer in Medina than his own, or even anecdotally, I'm pretty poor. And, when I think about myself, I just assume I'm the worst. And the Prophet ﷺ didn't say, no, that house is poorer than yours. Rather, he gave to the man and said, okay, now feed your own self and feed your own house with this. And really, really beautiful story. I'm trying to cut it short just for the sake of, time here, but subhanAllah. And now the Prophet ﷺ did this in an order. Must it follow that order, or can they choose? My opinion, Allah knows best, and this is based on different ahadith, different narrations of this incident and other incidents. So now, of course, we had that question that I mentioned earlier, and some ulama say that this is only this kafara, this expiation, is only for those who who do intercourse during the day of Ramadan. So I believe that you follow, if that's how you broke your fast, if that's how you violated your fast, I should say, not broke your fast, but violated your fast was by intercourse, then that's the order that you follow. Find a slave and free him. If you can free a slave, find one. I don't think there are any in America, but you never know. You never know. I think the ones that, yeah. So, however, that's almost impossible to do. But there are some in Mauritania, there are some in Waziristan, I think. But anyway, that's probably off the table for most of us. Fasting 60 days consecutively, that's definitely tough, because even during Shahraini Mutatabi'aini, 60 days consecutively. Because even Ramadan, you can break your fast for sickness and traveling, but 60 days, that it doesn't. Those rules don't necessarily apply. So, and Allah knows best. I'm not sure. I would have to look that up. So, what, feeding 60 poor persons, that's going to be the easiest option, which would be about $600. And there are organizations that would distribute that for you. 600 or 60 fidyas. They would do that, and that would be about $600. And so, if you did not break your fast by intercourse, but if you broke your fast a different way, with food or drink or masturbation, for example, intentionally, or whatever the case may be, intentionally while remembering the fast, then you choose which one you want to do. If you want to fast 60 days, okay. If you want to feed 60 poor people, then there's that option for you. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. So the last and final ruling to go over before closing, inshallah ta'ala, is isqat. Like for example, let's say someone broke their fast, then when could that obligation to make it up, or to do fidya, or to do kafara, when would that completely fall off and there be nothing on them whatsoever, no debt for them to repay? That would be if they are sick and poor. If they are sick, they are unable to fast. They're elderly, or they have some chronic condition, or as the man who came to the Prophet ﷺ and said that his, I guess, his, maybe his libido prevents him from fasting 60 days, or prevents him from that, in some way. And while also being poor, you don't have the money to feed 60 people. You don't have, $600, as like 40% of people in America cannot afford a $400 emergency. And subhanAllah, lots of Muslims among them. And that's another reason why it's very, very important to give your zakat, to help people like that out, subhanAllah. And so so if you are sick and poor, then you cannot fast, and you don't have the money to pay fidya, for example, or for kafara, feeding 60 poor. If you can do fidya, then something is better than nothing. Depends on the circumstance and depends on the reason why you're not fasting. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. So inshallah ta'ala, Ramadan will be starting tomorrow night. Inshallah, we will no longer be doing YouTube durus like this during Ramadan, except for the Friday sermon, except for the Friday khutbah, the Friday reminder. But halaqas from here on out will be starting at 9 p.m. and they will be through Zoom. And I posted a link to that on Facebook and also on our webpage. بارك الله فيكم. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.